Welcome back to In Response EDH. As always, I'm your host Albert, and I'm glad you can join us for another great Commander gameplay video. Unfortunately for today's episode, I forgot to get everyone's opening hands, but this game we have Jose joining us and playing Ghost Shintai of Life's Origin. This is a Shrine Tribal deck. This deck aims to search up every one of his shrines and overwhelm his opponents with card draw and wins through draining the table of all their life. Next up we have Mike, and he's back with Chatterfang, Squirrel General. This commander is no stranger to the channel, so if you've seen it in previous episodes, you know what it can do. Mike wants to amass an army of tokens he can sacrifice to drain our life totals, or more often than not, win through a Chain of Smog combo. I'm up next and playing Obeka, Brute Chronologist. This deck is all about ending the turn shenanigans. I'm playing a bunch of cards that give me an advantage until my end step, but with the triggers on the stack, use your ability to end my turn, to keep any creatures I might have created or stole, and cast cheap extra turns without killing myself. And last but not least, we welcome our friend Genesis, who is making his return to Magic after a 2-year hiatus. Today he's playing Prossh, Sky Raider of Care. This deck is built as a one-shot kill. He plays cards like Doubling Season to create a ton of kobolds to sack to Prossh. If that doesn't work, he pumps them with cards like Berserk or Hatred to kill you through commander damage. Before we get started, we would like to remind you, if you enjoy our content and would like to support the channel, consider becoming a patron. When you do, you're not only contributing to the channel's growth, but you're also being entered in our monthly giveaways, as well as receiving patron-only perks. All proceeds of our Patreon are reinvested back into the channel to bring you the best content possible. We would also like to thank our sponsor, Dragon Shield. Hit the link in the description of this video to check out the best product out there to protect your cardboard. You can also support the channel by using our affiliate link when purchasing product and singles at TCG Player. With that said, and the introductions out of the way, let's start the game. Mike starts us off with the basic forest, followed by a mana crypt, and taps out for a turn 1 Scute Swarm. I play a Prismatic Vista, I pay 1 life, and search up a basic mountain to the field. Jose plays a Marsh Flats and also cracks it to search up a Savannah and passes. Genesis plays a Command Tower. He taps it for red mana and goes Gamblin. He finds a card and puts it in his hand and has Mike choose the card that will be discarded, which is a Pattern of Rebirth. After that, he passes. Mike starts off by rolling for the mana crypt and wins the die roll. After that, he casts his commander, Chatterfang, Squirrel General. He then plays a Colony Garden, which makes him a 0/1 plan as it enters. This also triggers a Scute Swarm, and he makes a copy of it. Chatterfang sees the 2 tokens, and makes 2 1/1 squirrel tokens as well. He then moves to combat, and swings at Genesis for 1. I start my turn, and play an island. I then tap both lands to cast a Rakdos Signet. Jose drops a Flooded Strand, and sacks it. He then casts a Sterling Grove, and goes searching for a plateau to pay for it. Genesis plays a basic mountain, and taps 2 to cast Scroll Rack, which is what he searched up with the gamble. Mike again starts his turn by winning his mana crypt roll, and then draws for turn. He plays a Swarm Yard as his land drop, making another Scute Swarm and a Squirrel. He then taps the garden and casts a Crop Rotation, choosing to sacrifice it and searches up a Gaia's Cradle, again making another Scute Swarm and a Squirrel. He then taps the Gaia's Cradle and adds 10 green mana to his mana pool. He spends 4 of it to cast Asika's Chariot and makes 2 cats as it enters.
I'm just going to use sharks as cats.
Oh yeah, those
because
those look like cats. Mike again makes 2 more squirrels with his general. After that, he moves to combat and swings 7 damage at Jose. I then start my turn, and I also cast a gamble.
Everyone gambling at the table today.
Oh man, we some gambling fools.
I thought I was the gambler.
Yeah. Do not make me discard it.
I mean, I'm not gonna. Is it a board wipe?
Do not make me discard it.
We got two rules.
What is it?
Oh, dude!
Oh!
Blasphemous
You
act?
fucking...
Is it really? Hell yeah.
Why couldn't you
I just took the center one. Why would you put it in the center?
Yes.
It's random. Why would I put it in the center?
Can we get a hell yeah in chat?
Oh my
God
goodness.
damn it!
So you guys want to go to game 2? Or
That was a good one.
Horrible luck. After that, I play a basic swamp and pass to Jose. Jose draws for turn and plays a polluted delta. He then cracks it and searches up an underground sea. And we're still in disbelief as to what just happened.
Damn it, man!
Oh my goodness.
I was like, I'll go with center. As it won't be in the
Does
center.
it cost one less for each creature on the battlefield?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. So he could have cast it
For one red.
For one.
Yeah. Damn it, dude.
Would you guys say the Cradle is the biggest threat?
I think
Yeah.
Mike's the biggest threat.
Cradle definitely, because that's what's giving him all that mana.
Yeah. He then casts a Dryad of the Elysian Grove and plays a Badland as his additional land drop. After that, he ends his turn. Genesis then starts his turn by playing a Bayou and passes. At the beginning of Mike's upkeep, Genesis taps out to cast Beast Within on Gaia's Cradle. Mike then gets a 3/3 Beast and makes another Squirrel. He then finally loses the Mana Crypt trigger and gets dealt 3 damage. After that, he draws for turn. He uses the Beast and the Scoot Swarm to crew the Chariot and goes to combat, swinging everything at Genesis and making a copy of the cat token and another squirrel. I then play a Haunted Ridge as my land for turn, and then tap 4 mana using my Signet to cast my commander, Obeka, Brute Chronologist. Jose finally decides to play something other than a fetch or a dual land, and taps out to cast the Sanctum of All. After that, he passes. Genesis activates his scroll rack before his draw step and sets aside 4 cards. He then draws 5, including his card for turn. He then plays a Graven Cairns as his land drop. After that, he casts a Coalition Relic and passes. Mike rolls for the Crypt and loses another 3. He then draws for turn and casts 3 for a Phyrexian Altar. I then make a suggestion to him.
We won't.
Sack your whole board?
Just sack it. Just
sack everything.
sack it.
Just fucking sack it, bro.
I can kill you.
do enjoy the game however
I don't want to do that.
Don't worry.
He then crews the Chariot and goes to combat. When the Chariot attacks, he makes a copy of his Beast token and another Squirrel. He chooses to swing his army at me for 19, and I choose not to block since he can activate his commander to kill off Obeka. While I take my damage, Genesis taps his relic to put a charge counter on it. I untap and draw for turn. I then tap 3 to cast Jeska's Will. Unfortunately, I only get to add 3 red mana and reveal Aristic Study, ᴑᴜᴅᴇ Fire Dancer, and Sensei's Divining Top. I then use 2 of the red mana and a blue to cast the Aristic Study. I then use the last floating mana to cast Sensei's Divining Top. After that, I play a Polluted Delta and pass to Jose. Jose untaps, and on his upkeep, the Sanctum of All triggers, allowing him to search up a shrine from his library to the battlefield. He chooses to grab a Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest. On his main phase, the Fruitful Harvest adds 2 black mana to his mana pool. He then drops a Windswept Heath on the battlefield and cracks it to go and find a Taiga. After that, Jose uses one of his black floating mana to help pay for a Satyr Enchanter, and decides to be a nice guy and not pay for the Aristic Study. I then pay 1 mana to use the top to look at the top 3 cards of my library, in search of a possible answer to Mike's board, and then draw. After that, he casts a Sanctum of Shattered Heights using the rest of his floating mana. But this time he's not so nice to me and pays for the Aristic Study. He then draws a card from the Satyr Enchanter since he casts an enchantment, and ends his turn. Genesis draws for turn, and then taps out using his mana from the Coalition Relic to cast his commander, Prossh, Sky Raider of Care. As he casts it, he creates 5 kobold tokens, but should have created 6. Before he ends his turn, I remember to draw off my Aristic Study. Mike starts turn 6, winning the die roll for the Mana Crypt, and avoids taking damage and draws for turn. He then casts a Soul Ring, paying the study tax. He then uses 2 of his cat wolves to crew the chariot again. He then moves to combat and swings everything but the ⴍᴜᴅᴜ at me, since I made him spend his mana for a heuristic study. I then go to block the Chatterfang to try and help the table on my way out. When we go to damage, Mike activates his Swarm Yard to regenerate his commander. In response, I crack my polluted delta for no reason and scoop it up. He does get to copy a token with the chariot and chooses to make another beast, as well as another squirrel. On his second main phase, he sacks a beast token to generate black mana with his altar, and taps out to cast Slimefoot the Stowaway and passes. On Jose's upkeep, the Sanctum of All allows him to search up another shrine to the field. He decides to search up a Sanctum of Calm Waters, and still on his upkeep, Jose pays 1 and sacrifices his Sterling Grove to find another enchantment to the top of his library. He picks a ᴠᴜᴟᴜ and draws it for turn. On his main phase, the Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest will add 4 black mana to his mana pool, and then he draws 4 cards from the Sanctum of Calm Waters and discards a Journey to Eternity. He then casts the ᴠᴜᴟᴜ by using up his floating mana. When it enters, it gives each of his opponent's creatures -1/-1 until end of turn. In response, Mike sacrifices his ⴍᴜᴜ to the altar to add 1 black mana. He then activates his commander, sacrificing 6 squirrels to give the ᴠᴜᴜᴜ +6/-6 and takes it out. With the ability on the stack, Jose pays 1 and discards a mountain to activate the Sanctum of Shattered Heights and deals 4 damage to Chatterfang. Mike then responds to this by sacrificing his ⴍᴜᴜ token for another black mana, activating Chatterfang again, sacrificing his last 2 squirrels to kill off the Satyr Enchanter. Now that we got through all that, the ᴠᴜᴜᴜ wipes the rest of the 1/1s off the field. Jose ends his turn. Genesis then untaps and draws for turn. He then taps 3 to cast Yawgmoth's Will and chooses to cast Gamble from his graveyard. He really takes a gamble by selecting Jose to choose what card to discard, but this time Jose chooses correctly and discards a Blast Zone. After that, Genesis casts a Dockside Extortionist and creates 9 treasure tokens when it enters. He then uses 3 of the treasures to cast an Ashnod's Altar and ends his turn. Mike starts turn 7 by losing the mana crypt roll, 3 life, and then draws his card for turn. He immediately goes to combat and swings everything at Jose. Jose blocks one of the beasts with the Dryad and takes 14. On his second main phase, Mike decides to sacrifice one of his tokens to the altar and adds black mana. He then uses it to cast Pernicious Deed, floating 1 from the mana crypt. After that, he taps the rest of his mana to float 3 more colorless, as well as sacrifice all his creatures to the altar for 6 black mana. He then sacrifices the Pernicious Deed, paying 6 into it, to destroy all creatures, enchantments, and artifacts with mana value 6 or less. Mike follows that up by casting a Woestrider, creating a 0/1 goat. Before he ends his turn, he plays a Golgari Rot Farm as his land drop and bounces his forest back to hand. Jose untaps and draws. He then casts a Honden of Seeing Winds and passes. Genesis then draws for turn and leaves up all his mana and passes the turn to Mike. Mike starts his turn, replaying the Bounced Forest. When he goes to combat, he swings his Woestrider at Jose, dropping him down to 14. Jose draws a card off the Honden of Seeing Winds and another as his draw for turn. He taps 2 to cast a Farseek and searches up a Tundra to the field. After that, he taps 4 to cast Honden of Cleansing Fire, which will allow him to gain 2 life for each shrine he controls on his upkeep. Genesis then starts his turn, tapping 1 to cast a Mana Bolt. He then chooses to end his turn. On his end step, Mike channels Takenuma to mill 3 cards from his library and returns a creature to his hand. He chooses the Slimefoot and goes to start his turn. He starts it by sacrificing the goat to scry before drawing. Mike likes what he sees and keeps it on top. He then draws it as his card for turn and casts a Parallel Lives. After that, he moves to combat and swings the Woestrider at Genesis for 3. Jose then draws 2 cards and gains 4 life. After that, Jose casts a Dance of the Manse, where X equals 5. This will return each one of his shrines to the battlefield, as well as the Dryad of the Elysian Grove. After that, he ends his turn. Genesis then draws, and then taps out to recast his commander for 8 mana. When it enters, he creates 8 more kobolds, and then passes to Mike. Mike then starts his turn off by casting a Bastion of Remembrance, creating a 1/1 human token that will get doubled up thanks to the parallel lives. Jose then starts his turn by searching his library for a shrine with the Sanctum of All, and chooses to find Sanctum of Stonefangs. He then moves to his main phase. The Honden of Cleansing Fire triggers twice thanks to the Sanctum of All. Little mistake here, Jose gains 32 life instead of 28 as he should. The Honden of Seeing Winds then triggers, and Jose draws 14 cards. The Sanctum of Stonefangs will trigger next and drain the table for 14 and gain Jose 14 life. The Sanctum of Calm Waters will trigger next, drawing him another 14 cards and discarding 2. The Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest then triggers and Jose adds 7 black mana and 7 red mana. After that, he spends 4 of his black mana to cast Honden of Night's Reach, followed by Honden of Infinite Rage. He then plays a command tower as his land drop, and then pays 3 to cast Painful Lessons, drawing 2 cards and losing 2 life. After that, Jose casts a Moonblessed Cleric. As it enters, he searches up a Go Shintai of Ancient Wars, and puts it on top of his library. He then casts a Preordain, not bothering to scry, and just drawing the card he searched for. After that, he casts the Go Shintai of Ancient Wars, and follows that up with a Sanctum of Tranquil Light. Jose then moves to his end step and activates the Go Shintai of Ancient Wars twice to deal 11 damage twice to Mike, knocking him out of the game. Genesis starts his turn, taking 1 from the mana vault. He then quickly goes to combat.
Alright,
Wait,
I will attack you.
Go into
Jose.
combat?
Go into combat.
Before you go to combat, tap white, tap down Prossh.
Genesis shows us he had Berserk in his hand and would have knocked Jose out with commander damage. With nothing else, he just scoops it up and extends the hand.
GG to everybody. Nice one. Good. Nice one.
Don't fucking touch me, Mike.
The whole time I should have been attacking him first. I should have just killed him with 2 attacks on turn 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I probably would have made it.
I would have been dead. I would have been dead.
Congratulations to Jose. His Shrine Engine came online at the right time to stabilize the board and drain the table for a ton of life, all while gaining him a ton of life and card advantage. The Doomwig Giant was a great choice to search up with the Sterling Grove, since it forced Mike to sacrifice most of his board in order to retaliate. But the real story is that all of this could have been avoided had he not discarded the Blasphemous Act I searched up with the gamble. Who knows how the game would have turned out if that weren't the case. Mike did a whole ton this game despite not having a black mana source most of it. He got out to a crazy start and was just swinging for huge chunks of damage each turn. But once Jose started getting his shrines going, he wasn't able to keep up, even after wrecking his board with the Pernicious Deeds. Genesis seemed to get set back the most from the board wipes, since he wasn't able to rebuild his board the way Jose and Mike did, but despite his troubles, he was just about to one-shot Jose with commander damage, had Jose not been able to tap down Prossh with the Sanctum of Tranquil Light. There's not much I can say about this deck for myself. Obeka is just one of those decks that I just can't get a break with. Most of the time when my playgroup sees me play her, they make sure to get me under control before I get my shenanigans going. I did show Mike during the game that I had an Urborg in my hand from the start, but refused to play it so that I wouldn't help him with his mana troubles. That, and making him pay Rhystic Study 1 time, apparently sealed my fate. I guess with as many wins as I've been racking up, you eventually get these games where the table makes sure I'm the first one out. Well, that's it for this game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to like the video and leave a comment, and if you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Before we go, we'd like to give a big thank you to our amazing patrons. We are glad to have your support and thankful for each and every one of you. We here at In Response would like to thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you follow us on our social medias. We also stream every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for watching. Have an awesome day.